Having gained much more experience in reviewing, I wanted to do a second video review of the KLH Model 5 speakers that I have in the back. Those have been my main speakers for over 2 years now, so I would consider that I have experienced with them quite a lot, both in positioning, in vertical aspect, in how angled they are towards me, and how much space is between them, and everything in between. Those are a pair of speakers that have a three-way configuration, which means that there is a woofer driver, there is a mid driver, and there is a tweeter driver. Usually when you have a three-way configuration, you expect the sound to be better than if you have a two-way configuration. And I would say that they do create a sound that is quite a bit better than most two-way speakers. One thing that you have to take into account is that even though they do have a rather large mid woofer, it is best at reproducing mids. So I would still employ a subwoofer if you want to have better representation in the 20 Hz to up about 40 Hz range. That range is important even though there aren't a lot of Hertz, it's just a 20 Hz band. You will hear a lot of the sub-bass in that area, and that is the area where most of the impact and substance in music resides. So you may really want to get yourself a subwoofer. Now KLH Model 5 is a rather large speaker, they take quite a bit of space, and even though they aren't the most pricey speakers out there, they are quite capable. And one thing that they really do well is the mid-range. Because both the woofer and the mid drivers both work mostly in the mid-range, you'll hear a really full voice and a really smooth and natural voicing from them. They are the kind of speaker that really surprises you with how natural, how refined, and how rich they can sound. And I'm really surprised to be saying this, but they do sound quite natural. I've been testing them against quite a few speakers. For example, this is the Amphion Argon 3S, which is a pretty capable speaker actually. It looks quite good in person too. But sonically, the KLH Model 5 is much richer, deeper, and while not quite as bright, they do have better detail and better resolution. And that was interesting because the Argon 3S is quite pricey too. So I was expecting them to sound more poppy and more impactful, especially since the Argon 3S has a bass driver on the back, but then you have to take into account that KLH Model 5 is a fully sealed design. They also have the special suspension that they use in their speakers. So they are special both because of the construction and because of the driver tech. The drivers are quite light, so it is interesting to see the drivers. You could say that the speaker grill is more vintage looking. It has this harsher material on it, but it doesn't affect sound in any way. So I did quite a few experiments where I left the grill in or out, and it doesn't seem to affect the sound. And lately I've been leaving the grill in to protect the drivers rather than taking it out just to see the drivers, because the face of the speaker isn't quite that impressive in aesthetics. The face is just black in color with black drivers and silver accents. So while it looks cool, it is not that impressive. To drive the KLH Model 5, I've been using a wide number of sources, starting from Burson Funk all the way to KHS S300 Plus, which is the most powerful amplifier that I've used for them, but also less powerful amplifiers, but some of which impressed me quite a lot, like Cyrus One Cast and lately SMSL EO200 Mark II. And the EO200 Mark II is the most surprising of them all. Firstly, because the EO200 Mark II has quite a bit of power, but also some EQ options. Those speakers have a very mid-range centric sound, so they will present quite a bit of mids, quite a bit of voices and of presence in the voicing, which can create the sensation of furrowness and can be a bit fatiguing for some, even though they are quite smooth in the textures. When you enable some EQ and when you dial in some bass and some treble, you create a less mid-range for a sound and a more balanced sound, which I like quite a lot. So an amplifier that has even the most basic types of EQ will work quite well for the KLH Model 5 and for giving them a more natural sound. From my experience, they like to be seated quite a bit higher than the original stands allow them to, because the original stands make them mostly a floor standing speaker. And while I can understand that if you are sitting on a couch and watching movies, as I'm sitting at my computer most of the time, the best sound is when the mid-range driver is at the level with my ear, that is when I am getting the best sound, or when the woofer is at the level with my ear. If I have the tweeter at the level of my ear, I will hear a slightly too sharp sound, even though in this configuration I am adding the Aperion Super tweeters to increase the air and the sharpness of the treble a bit. Laterally, the speakers like to be placed as far away from each other as possible, but they do like to have that equilateral triangle formed. So it is important to have about as much space between them as you have between them and you. It is important to have this setting so that you get the best sound. I am sitting very close to them because I am sitting right next to my computer, which creates a more near field setting, which does affect the sound quite a bit. So the sound that I'm sitting on the couch and watching movies is much better than when I'm sitting at my computer and playing games and using them as media speakers. So while a more beefy amplifier is important and while it can surely improve the sound of the KLH Model 5, I think it is not a necessity. I was very happy driving them out of chi-fi amplifiers and out of weaker amplifiers because first, they are quite sensitive, and second, they don't scale quite that much with the amplifier. They get loud quite quickly, and even though you can push more volume into them with a stronger amplifier, they do not distort at all. You won't really use that much volume most of the time. So you may have neighbors, you may have people sleeping around the house, you may have concerns, and you may have reasons why you'd want to stay a bit quieter. So with keeping all of this in mind, I would say that the maximum volume offered by most entry-level amplifiers is more than enough for KLH Model 5. They won't attack your wallet by asking you to get them a beefy amplifier. Since the design is a bit on the vintage side of things, I think that they won't be on everyone's taste aesthetically. They have this wooden design, which is part of the boohoo typical aesthetic, but they do sound, I think, perfect. I think that most people will be really pleased with the sound. When sitting a bit farther away from them and when having a proper acoustic treatment for your room, they sound sublime. They are really rich. They have that analogic kind of sound where they are smooth, slightly warm, and they do have a very, very good voicing. They have the tonality that makes both male and female voices sound perfect. They have this really pleasing sound to them. You will hear layering being very good. You'll hear a lot of detail, and they will sound basically perfect. There is nothing that makes you think that they do have a coloration. Basically, they are very transparent. They allow music to shine through without applying a strong character to that music. And that is a strong positive. Most speakers that I've tested to date in the same room with the same treatment and in the same conditions as the KLH Model 5 have sounded rather V-shaped. Sometimes they do have a strong treble, but nothing sounds quite as natural and quite as full in the mid-range as KLH Model 5. Those ones are magical when it comes to the mid-range. At the moment I've made my original review, they were priced at $1,499 each, so about $3,000 for the pair, but right now they are selling at $999 each. So about $2,000 for the pair of the KLH Model 5, which places them in a whole new category of speakers. They became affordable, which makes them a good option for most home theaters, and I think they are an excellent option for a home theater because they make voices and dialogues quite easy to understand, but they are also great for listening to music, for listening to concerts, and for turning your little room into a club, into a dance hall, even into your own little studio. They don't have that really tight studio sound. They tend to be a bit slower in the sound, a bit more natural, a bit more romantic, and they do tend to sound quite full and quite happy. This means that most happy music will be presented full, happy, uplifting, while sad music won't have quite that sad tonality to it. While for most people getting a second set of stands won't be necessary, I do think that if you are sitting at a computer and if you plan on using them more in the near field monitor tradition, you will need something to bring them higher than the original stands. Otherwise, if you are going to be placing them as basically floor standing speakers, you will have a good experience regardless of what stands you use. The original stands are perfect. They do angle the speakers a bit upwards, which means that by the time they reach your ears, the sound will be perfect for your ears. Basically, they are made to be perfect. They are made to not require a lot of acoustic treatment. I was lucky enough to test them in both a well-treated room and in an untreated room, and they sounded quite great in the untreated room too. So you don't need to invest much with them. You will invest in the speakers and you can get yourself a $300 to $500 amplifier, some basic cables. You don't need the priciest cables out there, and you are set to go and to have fun. I hope that this video has been enjoyable to watch. I hope you will appreciate my video, especially since they are on sale right now and you could grab them for a better pricing than in my original works. I hope that you'll have the loveliest of weeks out there, and I hope we'll see each other really soon. Bye bye!